Okay, good evening. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jenny Carloni, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Umpqua Valley. And the League is a nonpartisan organization that has been registering and educating voters and encouraging civil discourse and supporting voter rights since its establishment in 1920. We encourage informed and active participation in government. In a press release issued today, Oregon Secretary of State Shemia Fagan said that she, quote, predicts a smooth election in November owing to the integrity of county elections officials. Dan Loomis is our election official, the Douglas County Clerk. After being appointed in October of 2019, he was elected to do the job in November of 2020. Dan was raised in Douglas County, spent 23 years in the U.S. Army, and now resides in Umpqua. Among other things, he and his staff have the important job of conducting our elections. Tonight he joins us to explain how that work is done, and there will be a question and answer session following his presentation. We will be taking written questions, so there are cards and pens available on the side table, or you may raise your hand anytime you would like one to be delivered to you. And with no further ado, I'd like to welcome Dan Loomis.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'd like to sit. I'm a crusty old disabled veteran that fell out of a lot of helicopters and airplanes, and very few and far between did I land on my head, but I have landed on my head. I just came from another meeting, Douglas County Veterans Forum. The introduction was very kind. I appreciate it, and I also very much appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all and share what the elections process is like. A little bit of my background. I currently am the elected county clerk, and I'm the senior elections official, but I have an elections director that is far more experienced and far smarter. In my 3 years of being the county clerk, my first 2 years I spent drilling questions on my elections director. My background was in military aircraft, and I also served as a aircraft crash investigator. I would write 52-page reports in detail about a minuscule chip from a gear in a gearbox. I dig and dig until I know that the system is operating correctly. My elections director experienced a intense level of interrogation every time he told me about an aspect of the elections process. I would dig and say, I want to find out if there's any vulnerabilities, if there's any weaknesses, and he would bring me to the ORSs, the manuals, the statutes that identify, how to handle each of those areas where I thought I might see a vulnerability. So I've definitely had to learn fast because I had no background in the clerk field or in elections. I did, full disclosure, I did serve for about a year on the Republican Executive Committee here in Roseburg for Douglas County. That was my introduction to politics as it is. And I also attempted to run for Douglas County Commissioner. I have, in my short 3 years, at about 2.9 years in, I have achieved certification with the Oregon Association of County Clerks, so I'm a certified county clerk. I have also been certified with the Association of Oregon Counties in County College. It's what County College is generally for county commissioners, and I am certified in that as well. My spouse is a active member of the community. She serves on the Veterans Advisory Committee. I serve on the Douglas County Veterans Parade Committee. My spouse serves with she is a Master Gardener, and she serves on the executive board for the Master Gardeners, is the treasurer for the Master Gardeners. What I brought today to speak to you about is the current election, mostly about what we're dealing with. During my last visit with League of Women Voters, I gave you all a dashboard view, kind of an overview of the elections environment for Douglas County, and I want to do that one more time. I'm also going to talk about this current ballot, voting procedures in Douglas County, how ballots are collected, how ballots are prepared for counting, and how Douglas County and Oregon impact elections overall. So I'm going to go over the dashboard view. Currently, from the 2020 census, Douglas County is listed as 111,201 citizens. Not all of those are voters, though. Currently, as of today, 87,511 people are registered to vote in Douglas County, and they will receive ballots for this election. 78.7% of the population is registered. Now, that doesn't mean that our registration rate is at 78. There is a group of people that are not allowed to vote, which is 18 or under 18-year-olds, and they're about 19.3%. So when you subtract those out, currently Douglas County's voter registration rate is at 97.5%. Wow. There's only 2.5% of the population, about maybe 1,500, 2,000 people that are not registered to vote. And they are not registered to vote for a variety of reasons. It could be, health reasons, or they're disenchanted with the election process. They may be in assisted living, that kind of thing. 2016, the Oregon Motor Voter Act kicked in, and Oregon became the leading state, turning on automatic voter registration through DMV. At that time, the eligible population of Douglas County was at 73% registered voters. And between 2016 and now, we're at 97.5%. That's a dramatic increase in voters. In Douglas County, on our ballots, all the way from federal, state, local, there are 622 electable offices. Currently, there are 547 elected officials seated, and 57 are appointed. There's a small number, I think about 18, that are vacant currently, but they are likely to be filled with this election. There are other elected officials in Douglas County. Those are precinct committee persons. There are 694 possible positions. Each of the two parties have, I think it's a little over 300 that they can elect as precinct committee persons. Those folks serve inside of their party, and they represent a small group inside of the county, inside of precincts. Currently, there are 233 of those slots filled. 42 of those are Democrats, and 192 of those are Republicans. Since the election in May, where we seated elected ones, there have been some changes where people have moved away, or they've appointed, the parties have appointed people to fill some of those positions. So currently we're at 233 of those seats filled. So we're only at 33.6% filled on those electable positions. There are 12 incorporated cities in Douglas County. Each of those have elected members there. Two of the cities, Roseburg and Winston, are broken down into wards. 4 wards for Roseburg, 2 wards for Winston. In the county, we have 15 ballot drop box sites. 11 of those are permanent sites. 4 of those are portables. So the city of Glendale, Riddle, Drain, and one more. Oh, my counter in my office are the 4 portable drop boxes. We've been very successful in procuring sites and positioning drop boxes. We're really excited by the fact that we have the drop box over in front of the Roseburg Bi-Mart, because that is the busiest intersection in Douglas County. And we have 3 boxes on this side of I-5 in Roseburg, and for a long time we didn't have one on the west side of I-5, and that's where the majority of the Roseburg population lives, is on the west side of Roseburg. So we're really excited having that west side Roseburg box over there. As you came in the parking lot, hopefully you noticed that a large ballot box has been positioned in the library parking lot. That property across the street where we usually had our largest box, our busiest box, sold a couple of times, and the previous private owner that had it, we had an agreement to allow us to put it there for free. He just said, you know, I'm helping the community out by leaving it there. There's a new owner, somebody out of the Portland area, I believe, and you can see they're building a fence around that property, so that option was no longer available. And we're very thankful to have the box positioned in a place where we can continue to have drive-up traffic, and it's on city property rather than private property over there. 29 precincts. Redistricting got finished early this year, and we switched from 28 to 29 precincts. And that increased a lot of our splits. Each precinct is split by different districts, either state, federal, special districts, and each of those will have a different ballot depending on where you are within that precinct. There are 87 special districts. That's a college's educational service district right here in this building. Transportation district, school, fire, water control, library, parks and rec, port, like Port of Umpqua. There's a 911 district, road districts, health districts, cemetery districts. We have one, and sanitary districts. Even though I have all those districts, we also have districts that overlap Douglas County from other counties. There's 11 of those. Thankfully, we are not the home of any of those 11 shared districts, which means I collect the results of their shared district results, and I just send them the results. I don't have to report those 11 special districts that overlap Douglas County. Because of what I said before, 29 precincts, many splits, over 200 splits. There are a lot of ballot styles. You may live on one side of the street inside of a special district, and the other person across the street may live in another district. You too will receive 2 different ballots because of the districts that you live in. So this election for the November general, there'll be 65 different ballot styles.
Wow.
So each of those ballot styles, I have to make sure that each of you gets the correct one. We have a printer in Bend that is very dependable, that takes care of that. We have a printer for our envelopes, we have a printer for our ballots, and then we have a assembler over in Bend. They create and push out the majority, about 87,000 ballots. But we print an overage of about 4% and have that delivered here to my office. And people come to our counter and they call, or we get updates from the state that say that this person's changed address and we need to send out a different ballot. Or they come to the counter and say, I'll be in Arizona in my RV during the election. Can I get a replacement ballot because I won't be here at the time when it's delivered? So we assemble ballots there at our office. Each of those ballots that we assemble has to be right. We cannot deliver a wrong ballot. So I'm the chief elections official for the county. I build a ballot for the individual at the counter, or my lowest paid employee builds one at the counter. No matter who it is, there's a peer review. After that person assembles the ballot, they hand it to another employee, myself included. I'll hand it to another employee. They check it, make sure that that ballot precinct split, and during a May primary, whether they're getting a partisan ballot, make sure that they get the right version is correct, and then we either mail it or hand it over to the person at the counter. Our biggest challenges in the election environment is misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. It spreads pretty rapidly. It's spread since, well, long before the 2020 election, but it became more pronounced since the 2020 election. And so we have been trying to restore public faith in our voting processes. The other challenge I have is temporary staffing. We hired during this general election probably 40 people, and we put out the vacancy on the HR website, and we don't get the 40 that we need. And so we are calling previous employees and saying, would you consider coming back and working for this election? And we're very thankful that many, many of them do, and we have sufficient people to work this general election. So we definitely want to spread the word that we love to involve new people and get them experienced in how to handle working as a temporary worker in elections. And the other challenge that I have is voter apathy. We went from 2016, where I had about 73% of the eligible people registered to vote were registered. Now we're at 97.5%. You would think that voter participation rates should have increased along with that, but that is not the case. Voter participation rates have actually slowly declined, 0.5% or 1% each year, each election. Voter apathy is a big problem, and the fact that people will call me up on election night or the day after and say, this is the wrong ballot, I want to vote on a different partisan ballot. Well, I sent them the right one by their registration. They'll call me and say, I didn't get my ballot on election night. And they'll call from like Reedsport. And it's tough, to give them an answer that is positive, saying, I want you to continue to participate. I need you to be more engaged. I need you to check your voter registration. I need you to let me know earlier that your ballot did not arrive, because I can fix it. If they call me earlier than the day, I might have a team that's going over to the Reedsport box to pick up ballots that could deliver that ballot to that individual if they call me earlier in the day. But that's the kind of things that we deal with when it comes to voter apathy. Next, I want to talk about the current ballot that you're about to receive. Election day is rapidly approaching. On November 8th, we Oregonians will select a new governor, several new members of Congress, all of our 60 state representatives, and half of the Oregon Senate. Representatives are elected every 2 years, senators every 4 years. June 1st of this year was the first day for candidates to file, and August 30th was the last day for them to file. A lot of folks are asking about where to get candidate information for folks that are on the ballot. Something to keep in mind: municipal candidates, city candidates, like mayor or council members, file with their city clerk or their city recorder, their city elections official. They don't bring that paperwork to me at the county. Judicial and state level candidates file with the Oregon State Elections Office. They don't bring their candidate filing if they want to become our state senator or state representative. I don't take their filing. Soil and water conservation districts, those actually do not belong to the state elections office or the city or the county. They belong to the Oregon Department of Agriculture. They file with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. So they are on the ballot this year, or this election. Today was the deadline for new Oregon voters to register. So say a voter that's turning 18 that didn't register at the DMV, if they had not registered with me before today, or by today, they would not be able to receive a ballot. If they were a voter from out of state and they were moving into Oregon as a new Oregon voter, I would not be able to register them after today, or to give them a ballot after if they didn't register by today. Now, if they were a Oregon resident and their ballot register, or their voter registration had gone inactive because they failed to turn their ballot in, or for other reasons that can happen, they can still come back to me, even by as late as election night, and say, I'd like to update my registration. I'll say, sure, let's do it. We update their registration. I build them a ballot. I hand it to them. There's a booth right in the hallway. They can vote it. And as long as they hand it over by 8 o'clock, it's good. Remember in the May primaries that the voter registration deadline, that's usually about 21 days prior to the May primary, is for the purpose of that voter registration deadline is to prevent people from changing party affiliation after that date, because we have to print and generate a huge amount of partisan ballots for those folks that are registered with one of the two major political parties. All others, there's 9 other groups of voters that receive the same ballot, which is a non-affiliated ballot, basically. Thursday, day after tomorrow, I am going to Springfield with my elections director, and we are the only ones with the keys. We will be unlocking a delivery of the 87,000 ballots from Bend and releasing those into the U.S. postal system. And that's when they get introduced into the postal system on Thursday. So a day or two after is when they start arriving in people's mailboxes. And then, of course, Tuesday, November 8th is the election deadline, 8 p.m. Because of postmarks rule, folks can actually put their ballot into a mailbox as late as election day, and as long as a post office postmarks that on election day, it will be counted up to 7 days after the election. So what that did was change the fact that at 8 p.m. on election night, I would give a preliminary election result, and now I have to wait to deliver the the final unofficial result for 7 days. I have to wait that 7-day period before I give that, because I have to count the ballots that come in that were postmarked by election day. Just help everybody understand, a ballot that arrives in my office on the 7th day after the election through the U.S. Postal System that has a postmark of November 8th or earlier is a valid ballot. If it does not have a postmark of 8 November or earlier, it is not a valid ballot. In the May primary, that was our very first time doing postmark rule. In the May primary, the Oregon U.S. Postal System really did an incredibly good job. Every ballot was postmarked, except for about 6 or 7, and 2 of those, I think it was about 2 of those in that 6 or 7 were counted because they didn't have any kind of mark on them, but they were received during that 7-day period. But what the focus that you should see is the fact that the U.S. Postal System made sure that all 87,000 pretty much had a postmark on them. And I believe that the rate of postmark ballots will increase as we go further into this process. We often give our attention to the top of the ballot, where there's a U.S. Senate, Congress, or governor getting the most attention, the most enthusiasm, the most campaign dollars. But further down the ballot are good people, your neighbors, your fellow community members, who are volunteers and are coming to serve positions like mayor, city council, school district, water district, or soil districts. Governors, senators, and representatives make the big decisions, but our local offices often decide those closer to home and day-to-day matters, like whether your library is repaired, how many police, EMT, firefighters we have, the quality of education for our kids, our grandkids. Please give those important positions your attention as well. So I'm going to talk about what's on our ballot coming. Depending on your residence address, your ballot may contain the following contests, but it may not contain all of them. U.S. Senator, U.S. Representative. Douglas County, because of redistricting, now is split into the 2nd and the 4th district. Oregon Governor. Oregon Representative, the 1st, the 2nd, the 4th, and the 9th district cover Douglas County. The Oregon Commissioner of Bureau of Labor and Industry, we call him the BOLI Commissioner. Statewide ballot measures. There is number 111, 112, 113, and 114. So every voter will see all 4 of those in this case, because it's statewide. 111 amends the Oregon Constitution to add that the state ensure that every resident of Oregon has access to cost-effective, clinically appropriate, and affordable care as a fundamental right. It would make Oregon the first state to list health care for all residents as a constitutional right. Measure 112 repeals language allowing slavery or involuntary servitude as criminal punishments and authorizes Oregon court or probation or parole agencies to order alternatives to incarceration for convicted individuals. Measure 113 addresses legislative walkouts by excluding state legislators from re-election for 10 unexcused absences. Measure 114 enacts a law outlining a procedure to apply for a permit to purchase a firearm and prohibits ammunition magazines capable of holding more than 10 rounds. The measure requires a public list of persons who attempt to purchase firearms. I have expressed what the measures state. I cannot offer any opinion on what you should say, whether it be yes or no on those, but just to explain what you will see. City mayors. We have 12 incorporated cities, and 11 of those mayor seats will be on the ballot. City council members, 34 seats will be on the ballot. Of course, depending on what city you live in, you'll only see those seats for your city. One of those shared districts that I talked about, one of those 11 shared districts will be on the ballot. The Central Lincoln Public Utility District will be having one seat voted on here in Douglas County, and only about 4,130 voters will see that on their ballot. Now, county-wide ballot measure, there is one. It's concerning the psilocybin law, and it states, shall psilocybin-related businesses be allowed in unincorporated areas outside city limits of Douglas County? Yes or no? County-wide advisory question. County-wide advisory questions help the Board of Commissioners get a sense of how the county is leaning. It is a non-binding question, meaning just because you vote yes or no does not bind the county to any issue. And that question on the ballot concerns the Roseburg VA Hospital. It states, do you believe that full services should be restored at the Roseburg VA Hospital? Yes or no? Now, city ballot measures, depending on where you live, you'll see only one of these but there are 11 of the cities that have put ballot measures, ballot measures concerning the psilocybin rule as well. They ask whether to prohibit or allow psilocybin businesses in their jurisdiction. Here's where I want to make sure that you understand. I read you how the statement is for the county measure, and because it's county-wide, every voter will see it. And whether you choose yes or no on that one does not automatically mean that the city that has placed a similar measure will match so you have to read carefully. Read your ballot carefully to determine whether a yes or a no will prohibit or allow, depending on how you want to choose. Just because you chose yes on the county one doesn't mean that you automatically choose yes on the city one. It may not, they might not agree with each other. So please, just make sure that you spread that word that people should pay attention to how they read that. Folks in North County, there is a fire district tax measure. One measure concerning the North Douglas County Fire and EMS tax levy. Question is, should the tax levy continue? Yes or no? Only about 4,110 voters will see this on their ballot. And that covers what will be on the Douglas County ballots here. Next, I want to talk about voting procedures in Douglas County. Before turning in a ballot, we always advise folks, make sure you review and complete both sides of the ballot. Some folks may be in a rush and assume that the only issue on their May ballot the only issues on their May ballot or the previous year's ballot were on just the front side. But a lot of times they bleed over to the back side, and definitely this year, most all the ballots have something on the back side. Make sure you sign your ballot return envelope. I can tell you during the May primary election that this year, I think we had about 42% participation rate from voters, and about 700 of those ballots, we had to send a letter to the voter saying you forgot to sign or your ballot signature didn't match. Of those 700, about only 300 of those folks cured that ballot. Now remember, because of the postmark rule, that period after the ballot, after election day has been lengthened. You know, in previous years it was 14 days you had to cure that ballot. Now you have 21 days to cure that ballot. I cannot certify the election results until after that 21st day after the election, because I have to give the opportunity for those folks that have received these letters, you know, because a lot of times we're writing those letters after election night. You know, if you cast your ballot early, great, because I can send you the letter early and you have even longer to cure that ballot. But again, 400 people that could have had their vote counted did not follow up with that letter that I sent to them and come and cure that ballot. Either, you know, a lot of times they can just sign that letter and send it back, and if the signature matches, we can cure it. But you know, if they're in town, we'd love for them to come in, you know, sign the ballot itself, or give us an updated voter registration to show that, you know, their ballot has, you know, I have voters, seriously, I have voters that have a 1968 voter registration, and that's all I have in the voter registration database. And they expect their signature to have not changed since 1968. So, but I can encourage them to come and update their voter registration, but I can't make them. So, one of the calls I get often is, I don't remember what my signature looks like on my previous voter registration. And here's what I tell them. The likelihood is that since they've registered to vote, they visited DMV, and right there below my face is my signature that DMV sent to my Oregon voter registration my file. So that signature that I signed at DMV is in my file under my voter registration, and that's what I tell folks. Look at your driver's license. There's an image of your signature there that I have. Next question that you guys wanted me to answer was how are ballots prepared for counting? After ballot return envelopes, sorry, the lighting here is tough on my eyes. After ballot envelopes are signature verified, they can have the ballot extracted. Multi-party election boards. We have 8-foot tables, 4 chairs at the table. The person sitting at this corner is facing somebody from another party at that election board. The person, this chair, is facing somebody from another party. There's multi-party representation at the election boards. A worker brings a group of ballots that have had the bottom sliced open, and then the ballot return envelope has the voter's information on the label. All the ballots are turned over so they're facing down, that the workers at the table don't look at the individual's name, their address. They only extract the ballot out, unfold it, and then the ballots are moved to the tally room. And then they are tabulated. Another question that you guys want, or I'd like to answer for you. How does Douglas County and Oregon impact elections? And I've made a couple of helpful visual aids. But Douglas County political party ratios currently, I don't give this to cheer on or make any judgment about any party. But currently, the Democratic Party in Douglas County is at 18.9% of the voters. The Republican Party is at about 38.6%.
What was that?
The Republican Party is at 38.6. The 8 other political parties are at, altogether, they're 7.2%. And then there's another block. There's another block. It's a group of voters, but this group of voters does not have a party. They're called non-affiliated voters, and in Douglas County, they account for 35.3% of the voters. So more than a third of the voters in Douglas County do not have a party affiliation. That has increased significantly since, I have a page here. In 2002, non-affiliated voters in Douglas County accounted for 20.4%. And each year since 2002, it's basically each party, the 2 major political parties have lost 1% each year, and the non-affiliated have gained 1% each year. That's the evolution of where we're at today. This is just raw numbers. Currently in Douglas County, there are 17,291 more voters in the Republican Party than there are in the Democrat Party. Those stats help me understand that the opinions, beliefs, and election results of many vocal minorities in Douglas County may not reflect the majority of the county. So I'm going to now talk about those same percentages in Oregon overall. So that's what the pie chart looks like for Douglas County. So now I'm going to talk about Oregon overall. The Democrat Party overall in Oregon, 33.8%. So right at a third of the voters in Oregon are Democrat. The Republican Party, 24.5, so less, just a little under a quarter of the population is Republicans in Oregon. The 8 other minor political parties, same thing, 7.2%. Douglas County reflects Oregon in that case. Non-affiliated voters, voters that lack a political party, are the largest block of voters in Oregon, 34.5%. So voters without a party are a greater number than the 2 major political parties. So now my synopsis of that. Oregon political party ratio, currently in Oregon, there are 282,282 more voters in the Democratic Party than there are in the Republican Party in Oregon. These stats help me understand that the opinions, beliefs, and election results of Douglas County may not reflect the majority of the state or the nation. That's the visual of the ratios for Oregon. Another slide I made, Douglas County only accounts for 2.9% of all of Oregon voters. The Portland metro area not just the city of Portland, but the Portland metro area encompasses 3 counties: Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah. Those 3 counties, the Portland metro area, account for 42.2% of the voters in Oregon. So a lot of people come to my office and say, I voted for this candidate, all of my neighbors voted for this candidate. How can you tell me that they did not win the election? And this is the fact. Only 2.9% of Oregon is Douglas County when it comes to voters. And if a candidate wins over the Portland metro area, how is one small county's vote going to outweigh that? That's an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of folks. That's the visual representation, 2.8%. And Portland Metro, 42.2%. And all other counties, just under 55%. Another one that helps me understand, the state of Oregon, population-wise, only accounts for 1.3% of the total US population. Aren't you thankful for the Electoral College? Otherwise, we would not have a voice in elections without the Electoral College. That's the visual representation of Oregon when it comes to our votes in the nation. 1.3%. That concludes what I wanted to cover. Looks like I may have gone a minute or two over.
So that's fine.
But I want to definitely open it for questions. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So the rural vote, the rural constituency is you said 42 for the Portland Metro?
So,
Because you hear a lot that the rural don't have any say, but they actually are a bigger voting block than the other voting block, which is Portland Metro.
no, if I would have included like Bend, Eugene, Medford, Metro, kind of blocks to that, they would definitely outweigh the rural.
Okay.
Yeah. When I put about 55% were the other counties, not all of those are rural areas in those other 31 counties, I think it was. Yes.
Is the non-affiliated consistent throughout the state of Oregon in a larger percentage?
Well,
Or does it reflect in the country?
Our county is actually a little bit higher, well, around 35, and then the state is about 34. So I wouldn't think that there is much variation. I think the majority of the counties are probably in the same boat. And I attribute a lot of the non-affiliated voters to two issues. The voter apathy, the lack of engagement, because in 2016 to now, there's been over 20% increase in voters, and before 2016, those folks weren't interested in keeping their registration up to date, and they've been basically forced into the system. So that's one factor, and then the other factor is there's some disenchantment with the two major political parties, and people saying they don't want to participate in those political parties.
Do they ever think of democracy? Do they ever think democracy is going to survive if they don't take part?
We need to
Well, they're
really
still voting,
write our
right?
questions down.
They're still
Yes.
voting, they just can't vote in the primary, right?
Please write your questions down on a
Oh,
paper.
sorry.
Yeah.
Right, we
There
do
are
have
some-
some questions that have
yes.
been submitted,
Yeah.
and we'll take more now if you have them, but we would like to get everyone's if we can. Let's see, is there a restricted period of time around the election when a voter list is not available to the public? Voter
No,
list.
a voter.
I didn't hear the question. Would you please repeat the question?
It said, is there a restricted period of time around the election when a voter list is not available to the public?
Now, a voter list is a public document. There is a fee for us to produce the document. It's just that, the document is a living, changing document every minute of the day. Updates to voter registration are coming in, throughout the day. And so yesterday's list is different than today's list.
Another question is, why are ballots mailed out of Springfield, not Roseburg?
So 30, 40 years ago, we were, probably at 20, 30,000, 40,000 voters, and there was a capability within the county to produce the ballots here. Now that we've exceeded, 87,000 ballots, we need a contractor, a vendor that can do the work that we can't. And they produce the ballots in the Bend area. We use a Oregon vendor. We don't send it, outside of Oregon. Those ballots are delivered under lock and key from the vendor out of Bend, and they arrive at the first available U.S. Postal System distribution site. Roseburg would not be a distribution site. Springfield is. And so what happens is the ballots are broken into the precinct categories, basically. And there's 24 post offices in Douglas County, and those ballots are broken into sections where they'll go to the correct post offices, and not just all 87,000 show up at Roseburg's doorstep. And it's much more efficient for the distribution.
Okay, there was a question here that I think you answered. It says, are ballots received, looked at, or anything before they are counted? And I think you described that they're slit open and unfolded, but then they're sent off to be tabulated without anybody looking at.
There's definitely a visual inspection of the ballot. So, I've got this tray of 200 ballots, 300 ballots sitting in front of me, and I have to tell the Oregon Centralized Voter Registration Database to receive it. I'm looking at that ballot. As I scan it, I may notice that there's no signature, and I'll turn it up and flag it that ballot, has to have a letter sent out. I'm definitely physically viewing each of those ballots. The other thing that happens is, this is just a peculiarity. There are voters out there that will, for whatever reason, there's just, 3 or 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7, that have held on to their ballot from the previous election. It's an oddity, but some folks, for some reason, they feel like they can get partial credit, and they'll fill out that previous election's ballot, and they'll turn it in with the other ballots at the ballot boxes. And so I'm scanning, and then the computer will say, oh, that's the wrong ballot. And I'll say, why is it the wrong ballot? And then I'll look, oh, it says 21, not 22. And yeah, there's definitely a visual inspection of the ballot. I may see right away, this thing is soaked in ice cream. And I'm not going to put that through my sensitive ballot tabulation system machine. I'm not going to have it glued to the ballot before and after it. I'm going to separate that one out, put it in an envelope, and we're going to open it up at the election board, and then the election board is going to go through the process of either enhancement or duplication, where they'll pull a ballot style that matches that one, and then the two people will visually talk and say, okay, I see that they wanted, this candidate, and they watch each other, and they take a big purple magic marker, and they mark the new ballot, and they duplicate what the voter intended, and then there's a stamp, red stamp goes on there, and then that stamp is initialed by both those two people that observed that enhancement or that duplication. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, and does the county use software to count the ballots?
Yes.
And how many do you believe voters have died or moved out of the county and still need to be removed from the rolls?
So that's a moving target in the fact that if your voter registration needs to be updated, meaning that you moved across the street or you moved to another county, it's you that has to tell me about that and make that update. If you don't tell me about that, then I don't know about it. If you pass away, how are you going to tell me that you need to update your registration? Well, here's how it happens in Douglas County. Douglas County is different than the other 35 counties in the fact that we don't have a government public health department. We privatize that. And in so doing, the birth and death records person that used to work in that health department no longer is part of that government agency, and they moved into my office. So the individual that actually issues death certificates in my office opens up the Oregon Centralized Voter Registration Database and updates that individual's voter registration to cancel them because they've got a physical record saying that they're deceased. Now, say you traveled out of state and you pass away. I don't issue the death record. The county that you pass away in out of state issues that death certificate. They have no obligation to mail that to me. But fortunately, you have loving family members that write an obituary in the News Review. I subscribe to the News Review and the Myrtle Creek paper, the Douglas County News, and we scrub every issue of the paper looking at every obituary to find if there has been a death that was not recorded in Oregon, it was recorded elsewhere, and we find out about it through the obituary because it was recorded by the family members. Here's the hard part. You pass away out of state, and you have only outlaws, no in-laws. They don't write your obituary for some reason. How am I going to find out about it? I mail a ballot to your address attempting to reach you. That ballot goes there and they recognize that you're no longer there. They write undeliverable and they send it back to me. When I get that ballot back saying undeliverable, I inactivate your voter registration until somebody tells me that there's a death record and we can cancel you. But I will not send you a ballot any longer if I get an undeliverable ballot back saying that it was not delivered. That's a security protocol with Oregon elections process. If a ballot cannot be delivered to the individual as intended to and comes back to me undeliverable, I inactivate that voter and no longer send them ballots. But in 2021, the state legislature passed a House bill, I can't remember the number. The House bill required us to reactivate voters for a specific reason, because they had not voted in 5 or 10 years. And so it was a group of about 900 folks. We reactivated those folks, sent them a voter notification card, and those voter notification cards got a lot of attention because people were sending them back saying this person hasn't lived here for 5 or 10 years, or this person passed away 5 or 10 years ago. But the one thing that was great about that requirement is because I reached out to all these folks that were still on my rolls, but they were inactive. The fact is that I got a lot of answers back defining, yeah, this person's definitely dead, or this person's definitely moved out of state and registered in another state. I was able to cancel a lot of folks that I didn't have answers for because of that legislation that came in. So that's the tough part about, there are folks that have passed away recently that I'm mailing ballots to, and I get calls saying, why did you send my, dead spouse a ballot, well, it's because they probably passed away out of state and I didn't, get word about it.
Okay, one question is there any personal or identifying information or a place for it to be written on the actual ballot?
No.
No, I don't think so.
The issue is that the voters sometimes exercise their opinions and write messages to us. They literally write messages to us. They'll sometimes put their full name and address at the top. They'll sign their name in 5 different write-in spots and not print their name. It's just, there's odd things that are put on the ballots. I've been sent, long, lengthy letters on the backside of some ballots, telling me about, how much they hated me. It's just, there's odd things put on the ballots. But there is no place that asks them to put their personal information on there. And the fact is that that's purposeful. The intent is that once the ballot separates from the ballot envelope, that it becomes anonymous. There is no longer a way to identify who that voter is and how they voted.
Do you understand this one? What, if any, what measures, if any, are used to facilitate the voting rights of disabled people? Does your office have anything to do that, or other agencies, or?
We get support from the state, and we have some methods of our own. So folks that are visually impaired, we have alternate format ballots. So basically, I can print a ballot this big for some folks. I also have the ability to go on the State of Oregon Elections website, and an individual voter can look on a computer and then zoom just one very small section of the ballot, open very large on their, on their screen so that they can see it. We have a vendor that we engage with if the person doesn't speak English and wants to ask questions about the ballot. We have an ability to call an interpreter, and we can translate. The legislation recently passed, I don't remember what the legislation was, but it required the state to support many other languages. All right, I think it's like they started with five or six languages that the voter pamphlets are translated into, and those are available. And each year that goes by, if a group of folks in the state that speaks another language reaches a certain threshold, they'll add another translation, and they won't ever stop with the first 5 or 6 that they've started with. And so it's an oddity for me in the fact that our version of the state voter pamphlet, and we are covered by our voter pamphlet covers 3 counties, Coos, Curry, and Douglas. And that voter pamphlet in the May primary, where we had upwards of 20-some candidates per political party for governor, there was a huge number. That pamphlet in May was 76 pages long. Now, to this election, where they've added these translation pages in there to help folks explain, or help explain in different languages inside the voter pamphlet. That newest voter pamphlet, which is now narrowed down to just 5 governor candidates listed in that voter pamphlet. The pamphlet is now 100 pages long. So that's how the legislation has made it more accessible for folks that speak other languages.
I believe the state supports 14 languages now.
Oh, wow.
Like that, I think, yeah. Okay. Yeah, this question, someone might want to clarify. It says, of the 87,000 voters, are all of these active, aside from the 19.3% youth? So, I don't know if that means, I'm not sure what the definition of active is, but.
So yes, we're at 87,511 active voters who will be receiving ballots.
They'll get a ballot,
Yeah.
okay, they have the opportunity to vote.
Yeah. There's a number beyond that are inactive, and another number beyond that are canceled. You know, if I showed you the entire list of both active, inactive, and canceled, it'd be hundreds of thousands.
Okay.
And what does, I wonder, what does active mean?
Active means that you're able to receive a ballot. If you're inactive, you cannot receive a ballot.
So does that mean they voted in the last election, or?
No, it
No.
doesn't mean that.
Oh,
No,
okay.
it just means that your registration is up to date.
Oh, okay.
So that's a good talking point in the fact that you know, I might mail out 87,511 ballots, but that's not the final number that will be ballots that were actually or voters that were actually eligible, because between the time of mailing and the time of the election, that target keeps changing. You know, people move away, or they cancel their, or you know, they pass away. And so that number keeps changing. We keep getting updates to the voter registration database daily.
Okay, and are you concerned about the safety of yourself and your staff?
So I know that there's been legislation passed that we have a program. It's an SEL 550 form, and you know, also DMV and the judicial have their own forms where folks can ask for their voter registration to be confidential, and generally that's for law enforcement, the judicial, and like victims of domestic violence, where they want to be anonymous so their address is not public. They've passed a legislation to allow election workers to have that option because there's been some increased threat in Oregon. In fact, you know, it's not prevalent in Douglas County, but you know, when you look at the level of threat to election workers that is quantifiable, Oregon is actually one of the most risky places for election workers. Even though the legislation passed, I don't have any credible threats that I need to encourage folks to become confidential as election workers.
Okay. Someone asked, are you still a registered Republican?
Are you what?
That's a great question. Many of my folks that I work with in other counties in the elections arena have chosen to become either independent or non-affiliated. I feel that I have the integrity to represent everybody even-handedly and still be a member of the Republican Party. I never become political when I'm on the job, or even very, very little off the job, because I want voters, you know, whether the family come into my house or whether It's somebody I meet at the park, you know, just sitting there watching my kid play. I want them to know that I'm going to handle whatever partisan issues come into my office even-handedly, whether I, agree or disagree with it personally. I'm going to, give it the fair handling that every election office should. And I believe that all of my fellow elections clerks, elections officials in the other counties do the same. We, since the beginning of vote by mail in the year 2000, all of these county clerks have been getting together on a regular basis and trying to weed out any vulnerabilities out of the vote by mail system. That is our goal, is to make sure that it is as secure as possible. And the more I work with those folks, the more I realize they like me, they treat everyone even-handed.
Well, there was a follow-up to that question, and I feel like I should ask if the person wrote it down. So,
Go ahead.
I think you just answered it effectively, but it says, do you support the local GOP's resolution that the 2020 election was stolen and that there was massive voter fraud in the presidential election?
So, the local GOP is a broad statement. I believe there's a small, very small group of the GOP and others. I've had election integrity questions come from folks outside of the GOP, but there's a small faction that are questioning election integrity. I would not paint the entire GOP that way, but majority of the folks that are questioning the election integrity are members of the GOP, but there is no evidence of election fraud in Douglas County. It's kind of interesting to question the integrity of our election systems. Would also invalidate, if they were able to prove something, it would invalidate that party's strong wins consistently in this county. It's just an odd question. It's interesting.
All right, well, thank you. Are there any other questions people would like to submit?
I have one.
Sure.
The page in the voter pamphlet, I don't know if it was new this time about ensuring the accuracy of your vote. I found it very interesting, that page. But on one of the things says, each day a copy of the voter registration database is backed up and saved to ensure accurate information. So my question is, how is it backed up and how long is it saved?
So I am a satellite managing the Oregon voter registration database. That database is within the state elections office. I cannot, because of my experience, I cannot tell you exactly about it, but I also would not go into great detail because I would not want to violate the security of that database and tell you where it's positioned and how often they move a copy of it, outside of the office and that kind of thing.
Are they hard copies or how is it copied?
No, it's digital.
Oh,
Digital.
on computer?
Yeah, it's digital.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, each of us 36 counties are daily changing that database, and so I mean, it's just a preventative measure. That if there was some sort of problem, an earthquake in Salem and that building fell down, that the database is not just in that building only on a server. It's elsewhere.
I found that page very informative. I appreciate that.
Oh, there was a question right here too.
How many years are the hard ballots retained?
So, the federal law requires that federal ballots be retained for 22 months. Oregon state law requires me to keep the ballots for 2 years. So I have a storage facility for the ballots, and so in the May primary, those ballots went into sealed containers that were emptied out for the previous 2 years, or the May primary 2 years prior to that. So I take that May primary of 2020 out of those bins, I unseal, because those bins have a serial numbered seal on both ends of the bin. I unseal those, record the unsealing of those. I take out those ballots. I put in the May 22 primary into those ballots. I put serial numbered seals on them, and they go on an inventory, and then they go into a vault, and those are held for 2 years. And then the ones from the May 2020 election were shredded.
Thank you.
And your questions?
Are the ballots counted by a computer system here in the county?
Yes, yes. And that is actually a law now. I'm sorry, not a law. It is a directive now that counties that have over 500 voters must utilize an election tally system to count them.
Is it the same computer program throughout the state then?
No, there are three vendors in Oregon. There's a company called HART, there's a company called ESNS, which is what we used prior to 2017. And then there's a company called ClearBallot, which we've been using since 2017. ClearBallot is a vendor that not only covers about, I think it's 12 or 16 counties in Oregon, but they cover many counties in other states. ClearBallot is also unique in the fact that they are the vendor that checks other election systems in some other states. There's some other states that require another system to check the first system.
And could you say again, the
ClearBallot
program that you use?
ClearBallot is the name.
ClearBallot.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, well, on behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'd like to thank Dan Loomis for coming and spending this time with us. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming. The mission of the League of Women Voters is making democracy work, and we believe that we can do it by working together. Your vote is your voice, and we encourage you to use it. And if you know anyone who still needs to register to vote, it's my understanding that they can do it till midnight tonight if they do it online. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes, if they're new Oregon voters, they can make updates all the way till 7:59 on election night.
okay, right, that's good to know. And the easiest way to register online is go to OregonVotes.gov. So if you know anybody who needs to do that, you can pass that along. The League does provide nonpartisan resources to help you make an informed vote. We have voters' guides that are available over here in English and Spanish. They're also available online in large print version, audio version. What's the other one? And non-English versions can be accessed there. And the State League's website is LWVOR, that's League of Women Voters Oregon, .org. And that's where you'll find those digital versions of this information. And the League also has a system called Vote 411. Any of you who are old like me know that 411 was the number you dialed to get someone's phone number. You know, the directory, it was for information. But we use that, vote411.org. It's a website that allows you to see what will be on your ballot, and it became active a couple of weeks ago, so you could actually type in, when you go to this website, you can type in the address at which you're registered to vote, and it will bring up a copy of your ballot, or it will show you what will be on your ballot. And in some cases, it will show that the candidate did not respond. Now, candidates are invited to participate in this database and submit information about themselves and answer questions, and therefore make you a more informed voter. If you happen to go try out vote411.org and you find that a candidate did not respond, you might reach out to that candidate and encourage them to do so in the future. Okay, because the database is only as good as all the people who submit their information. Let's see, so other than that,
Can I add one more?
could you have what?
Can I add one more thing?
Yes, add something.
I am happy to stay after to answer any of the further questions, and also I invite you, you're welcome to visit our office, and I'd be happy to show you around, show you the system, show you the processes.
Great. And there are refreshments in the back. Please help yourself to those. There's information on the side table, as I mentioned, and some cards for Vote 411 if you would like to take that and spread the news. There are several league members here. If you have questions about joining the league or what the league does, we're open to questions. And again, we feel like we're all in this together, making democracy work. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.